What's up, legends? Before we get into this episode, I am giving away $3,500 worth of coaching for free to celebrate 6 years. Well, it's Optimize Your Body's sixth birthday and 3 months of free coaching. So it's the OYB scholarship and it's underway. And all you've got to do to enter the scholarship, I'm going to be selecting the winner based on why it's important to them. Be ready. Be ready to put the work in. All you got to do is click the link in the show notes to apply. And let's rock and roll. So today's episode is going to be regarding why I quit carnivore. Now, firstly, I've never eaten strict carnivore when it comes to consistently for long periods of time. I've been eating an animal-based diet for about 6 years now, and I've dipped in and out of strict carnivore, right? And I want to share my personal experience, right? And why really I just nipped it in the bud. Now, as you'll know, a lot of you may have found me through a lot of these collaborations I've had with big names in the carnivore space. And look, I'm all for what works for you, works for you. Get stuck in, right? But for me, being strict with something that extreme in terms of let's just talk about strict carnivore, right? So I've did that and I've cycled it for a few months here and there. And ultimately, I think it can have some benefits. Now, I felt good all in all. I felt good. Now, the problem with it is when I introduced other foods back in, I started noticing that it's great because number one, it's a good thing that you get sensitivities, right? So you'll notice with your gut and stuff and how you feel when you bring certain foods back in, your body tells you them, which is great because then you get clear signs. But what I did notice is I started noticing food intolerances, which I never really had before. So what you got to look at is everyone is always looking for the answer, right? When it comes to carnivore. For me, I was simply cycling it for 30 days at a time, going from my usual diet of animal based, where it's meats, fruits, have some dark chocolate, that kind of stuff, to strict carnivore, literally meat, eggs. I think beef tallow and bone broth is all I was eating. 1 month, I actually went even more extreme, and it was literally just meat and eggs. And then for 2 weeks of that month, it was the lion diet, right? And my personal experience when I went really extreme, number one, is I actually started losing energy towards the end, especially the lion diet. I mean, I'm a big guy. I need, 3,500, 4,000 calories just to maintain my weight. I simply can't get enough calories in. Number two, when you're not having carbohydrates and you've got kind of like a high stress lifestyle, like I have, because I work a lot, I enjoy what I do, I'm a high performer. And ultimately, you are going to have higher levels of cortisol and the stress hormones are going to be higher, right? So there's loads of research on that. So that was one thing. And one thing I did notice as well when I went really extreme, and I've never noticed this with anything before, is my libido actually started dropping. And for that to happen, it's like, wow, that's not a good sign. Okay. So I never went back after that because my health was telling me, this is probably not ideal. And I was pushing through hunger. And there's some value to making friends with hunger at times. But when you're pushing through it all the time, I was having one meal a day when I was doing lion diet. I was having 1.5 kilos of Scotch fillet, one meal, right? And I was having that in the evening. I was pushing through. I was getting quite a lot of work done. But when you're constantly going against your body's signals, like anything you do, that's going to have repercussions. But going back to what I was saying about gut health, right? What I noticed is when I bring certain foods back in, I was getting more extreme reactions. Now, some people say that's a good thing. But the reality is what you got to look at is there's some research on guts, diversity, and all that kind of boring science I'm not going to bore you with. But what happens then is your body's going to have extreme reactions. Right. And what you can actually do is you can build up by cutting out food groups or cutting out certain foods, you can actually build up an intolerance from doing that, from cutting foods out for prolonged periods, then bringing them back in. Then congratulations, you give yourself a complete intolerance to that food, which you might not have had before. So that's what I noticed. I also noticed with sleep. Now I track my sleep. I got this Oura Ring. I use the 8 Sleep as well. And what I noticed is my sleep was getting was being affected in a negative way, and that's probably related to higher stress hormones, right? Higher cortisol, for example, from not having, number one, enough calories, which is a big one for me. It's a very fortunate problem to have, right? Struggling to get enough food in, but number two, simply from not having carbohydrates, right? So I notice now black and white when I have carbohydrates in the evening. So what I do now is I backload my carbs. So I eat, protein and fats in the daytime on my first meal. My second meal, then I load in some carbs, fruits, Greek yogurt, sometimes some white rice. And I sleep way, way better, right? And I just feel better, feel more relaxed then in the evening. So look, the initial motivation for me to do it was major gut health issues, right? And I was even getting skin conditions. I was getting immune responses from certain plants. But when I look back, I was eating a copious amount of those vegetables, right? Which everything I do, I kind of push things to the limit, right? Even with foods I eat now, because I can get away with a lot of calories, I'll eat as much as I can, right? To get away with it. But it's all whole foods. But that, when I look back, was an issue, right? But look, it worked wonders for my skin condition that I was getting, and also for my gut health, and even, just cutting out certain plants and foods that were really causing me issues was life changing, right? But look, what I got to look at is what I want to share as well is energy levels, right? So, actually, that's another thing as well. It's like, it's not really an issue for me, but like social limitations as well. I noticed when I was eating carnivore, obviously you have to be super strict. That's not too much of a problem though, because I was going to Macelleria, which is the same place I always go to on Bondi, which is all just the best quality steak anyway. So I was happy. I always have the same thing there anyway, beef patties and eggs mainly, right? But for the average person, it can be disruptive as well, right? When it comes to a social life, especially if you eat in strict carnivore, you can make it happen. And it's not an excuse to not eat healthy, right? And make good decisions, but you're never going to be bang on with it. And then what happens then, if there might be, even a bit of olive oil or certain foods in there, like that you didn't see, maybe oils, and then you're going to get major extreme reactions, right? Because you got to get to the root cause, right? Why are you getting these issues anyway, right? If you don't get to the root cause of why you're having them, then that's going to be a real issue, right? So what I came to realize this year, I thought, right, I'm going to do a month of carnivore, right? Or keto. And then even like the first night, my sleep was terrible. I was going to do it. So I thought to myself, nah, man, I'm not going to do it. Why am I putting myself through that? My body's obviously telling me to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm thriving. And as the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, my friend, right? Now, I still eat animal-based. I still get, pretty much all the meat I eat is red meat primarily, although I have bought in some chicken thighs and some salmon and stuff lately. And I obviously have eggs pretty much most days, egg yolks, because egg whites seem to play on my stomach. I eat my Greek yogurt, I have my fruit and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what I eat. I have some dark chocolate. I love my coffee, right? So that's the way I eat, and it works for me, right? I feel amazing. I had my bloods done and my bloods are looking fantastic. So I don't want to mess around with it, right? But look, this is not really the reason why most people switch over to these diets, right? So let's take carnivore as an example. A lot of you listening to this, or a lot, you might even be thinking about, right, I've heard a lot of people doing the carnivore. My friend, this worked for them. I'm going to give it a go. Or you see it online, right? You see it seems to be working for everyone. Everyone seems to be getting shredded. It's picture perfect. Right, I'm going to try it. There's always going to be ramifications, my friend. And again, going back to the root cause, if you're going over to, right, I'm going to switch over to whatever diet that is, you're still not getting to the root cause of why you're overeating, why are you potentially emotional eating, why are you still doing that, right? What is the reasons for what are your triggers? Why are you, why is it you can't just have a small amount of something in moderation? Why do you always have to eat like an asshole when you eat those foods, right? We've got to understand, like, okay, but most people don't want to get to that root cause. And to be honest, like, it's not always necessary to go that deep. And like, I know we had a podcast recently. It was like, therapy, all those kind of things, they can help. It doesn't have to be that deep though, but you've got to use these things as a tool instead of the answer. If you're going to do carnivore, you're going to try keto, you should be using that as a tool in your toolbox. Like some people implement fasting as a tool in their toolbox. Hell, you could even introduce cardio as a tool, right? All these things can be helpful tools to be used, but you need to have the solid foundation and the fundamentals in place before you go over to these things. And in fact, most people actually cause more harm than good. Now, some people get a lot of benefit from going carnivore or keto or whatever because they feel great and, they look better as a side effect. And then what they notice when they go back to old behaviors, they felt like dog shit. Okay, now I better go back to carnivore keto. And a lot of people feel good doing it and they can adhere to it. And this is a key thing I wanted to talk about as well as adherence, ladies and gents, right? Like when it comes to carbohydrates, for example, and cutting them out, most people are not going to be able to adhere to that, right? Because the body's primary source macronutrient is going to be carbohydrates, right? Naturally, we're going to want that because it would have been rare to come across carbohydrates in nature as hunter-gatherers, right? So if we had the opportunity, we would eat the fuck out of carbohydrates, right? Like if we saw some fruit on a tree, we're going to eat the hell out of it, right? Because it's quick, fast source of energy. But that being said, most people are just not going to adhere sticking to keto or carnivore, which is really, really low carb. Now, a low carb diet, that's another conversation, right? That's probably more sustainable for most. So adherence is a big thing. So if you're thinking of switching over to carnivore or thinking that's going to be the answer, then guess what? Most of the time, it could potentially cause more harm than good because when you end up going back to the old behaviors, to the relationship with food that you had before, or this is what happens a lot as well, is people have stressful events. People don't think when they start a diet, they just think, right, I want to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to follow this diet and that's it. I'm going to lose it. It's Doesn't work like that, right? People don't think about what they need to do after they've lost the weight, for example. You got to have a strategy. You got to have a maintenance phase. You got to potentially reverse diets. This is why over 90% of people fail when it comes to following a diet. And then number two, like I said, adherence. When you go back to old habits and you bring in some of those ultra processed foods, then they're designed to make you overeat. You're going to overeat and you might get sucked back into that. And then if you keep going from one extreme to another, let's say you go for a few days or maybe even a week or whatever when you on holiday, or you have a stressful event, you guess, because those foods are addictive, right? It's not as simple as just, okay, I'm going to have some ultra processed foods and then I'm going to switch it back off. Some people can do that. Most people can't. Then what happens? You gain a bunch of body fat and the body just gets better at storing fat every time that happens. In fact, there's research to show the body creates permanent fat cells whenever that happens, right? That's not good, my friend, right? Because then it gets harder and harder to lose that fat. And then you may have seen or noticed this before. Every time you try and drop weight or get in shape for something, it seems to be getting harder and harder every time. And that is because of the yo-yo dieting, going from one diet and then going back to old behaviors and gaining the weight back. Find another diet, back to old behaviors. If you feel like I'm talking to you, my friend, then the reality is the carnivore diet is not going to be the answer for you. And as I say, it's simply not going to be an answer. You need to use these things as a tool instead of, trying to just go, yay, I'm going to solve all my problem with this one thing. It just doesn't work like that. You've got to do the hard work. You've got to have a strategy. You've got to be in it for the long run. And diets don't work long term. They work until they don't work for the most part. I don't care what diet that is. Yes, carnivore is, you could argue, well, you couldn't argue, it's the facts. You're going to get all the essential nutrients you need from pretty much anyway. I wouldn't recommend it to most people because it doesn't, because you're getting all the essential nutrients you need. That doesn't mean you're going to be getting optimal nutrients, right? That's another conversation. So look, going back to why I quit and the lessons that I learned, I've kind of shared that with you. But I want to really kind of wrap this up to make it more value now. Insights that I've shared is, look, even me, I'm super, super disciplined and I can apply more willpower than most when I need to. I would not be able to stick to carnivore long term. Now, another factor of that is kind of physiological with me as well. It's not just psychological. Yes, psychologically, I would find that extremely hard, and I would struggle to do that unless I had to do it. God forbid if I had some sort of immune issue or whatever. But physiologically, obviously, I just couldn't get enough calories in, right? So it wasn't good for me, right? Long term anyway, it just wouldn't be. It could be a good tool to use, but I don't think I want to risk it because everything's working for me right now. You know what I mean? And metabolic flexibility is a really important thing to have, right? Throwing in is, you got to throw that curveball, right? Just like you would with your training. You have to switch that up at times. You can't just keep doing the same thing and expect to get continuous results, right? The same goes for food. Throwing in some carbohydrates every now and then is going to be a good thing for most, right? For performance in the gym, potentially for sleep, dropping stress levels, hormones, all those kind of things. And then, dropping them down and bringing the fats back up and having that flexibility, right? Metabolic flexibility is really important. The other insight then was the fact that eating lots of fatty meat. I wanted to touch on this as well, right? Now, for me, it's great because if I eat beef, I always have full fat because I want to get all the nutrients. Everything I have is full fat, and I think everyone should have whole meats. And even if you're going to have yogurt or milk, make it whole, full fat. Don't get low fat because that's going to be processed, right? But at the same time, most people can't get away with half the amount of calories I can. So when they go over to carnivore, or keto is even worse, actually, they're adding in all these fats. They're having fatty cuts of meat. They're not having 5% or 2% lean beef. Most people are having fatty, right? And then if they're doing keto, okay, let's just take keto out of it, carnivore. Then they're adding in the ghee oil, or they're adding in the beef tallow on top of that. The fat's really calorie dense cooking oils, and they end up overeating, right? Because you're having all these fats. Fats are the most calorie dense macronutrient, right? So 1 gram of fat is basically 9 calories, whereas 1 gram of carbs is only 4 calories, 1 gram of protein is only 4 calories. Hell, even 1 gram of alcohol is only 7 calories. So when they're adding all these fats, they end up overeating calories, right? So you might initially get some results, but then because you've been in a deficit initially, your metabolism slows down, and then you're adding in all these fats and you're having fatty meats on top of that. And boom, people end up gaining fat, right? So that's a problem as well. So that's something I wanted to touch on as well. And what other stuff have I learned from that experience? But all in all, it's been a net, like switching over to animal based. Can you see the book behind me? The number one turning point for me was reading, shout out to Dr. Paul Saladino, right? Was reading the Carnivore Code. And for me, that's working well, right? Beef, beef organs. I do have some chicken thighs here and there, like probably once a week. I've been bringing that back in just because I enjoy eating them and they taste great. Some wild Alaskan salmon I'll have maybe once or twice a week on average, maybe even just once a week. But it's all, other than that, it's just beef. I have some beef liver. I've been eating chicken hearts as well lately. My girlfriend's Brazilian, right? So they taste amazing. So switching up a little bit, primarily beef though. Fruits, full fat Greek yogurt, right? So dairy, love that. Having that, I have that kind of most days. I have some white rice. Obviously, I'm not, Paul Saladino. White rice works really well. And by the way, white rice is better than brown rice because, you digest it easier, hasn't got the anti-nutrients in there. So that's kind of how I eat. So it's been a game changer for me, just cutting out those issues that I was getting on my gut, right? Cutting out, plants which are causing issues, right? So everyone's very different. There's so much variance from person to person, ladies and gents. But long story short, that's why you likely won't see me go in strict carnivore anymore. Maybe I will at some point, but nah, it doesn't work for me. And for most people, it's not going to be the answer. Use these things as a tool is the big takeaway here. And you've got to have a game plan which is going to be sustainable, right? When it comes to nutrition in particular, you've got to have metabolic flexibility. That's key for optimal hormone health, performance in the gym, brain health, all that kind of stuff. You've got to have that. Unless you have serious immune conditions, that's a different conversation. And obviously a lot of, or, particular illnesses that keto is better for. But for the most part, that's what you need to focus on. And then finally, what you want to look at is what really is ultimately what way of eating can I stick to forever? What one feels the easiest, right? And the research is clear on this. Whatever approach feels easiest to you, if low carb feels easier to you, if higher carbs feels easier to you, because a lot of people, thrive on eating higher carbs and their body type and their metabolic type works well for that. And like I say, everyone's different. Body type, metabolism, fat gain. Some people gain fat easier than others. So, that's what you got to look into, my friend, right? It's different for everyone. It's not a one size fits all. And I'm going to be over and out with that, ladies and gents, anyway, right? So look, hey, please, I really need your help. Give me a rating and review. If you listen to this on Spotify, just give me a rating on the stars. It takes 2 seconds. If you're on iTunes, it takes a little bit longer. Just scroll down, go to my episode list, scroll down. It'll give you the option to give me a rating and a review, please. It'd be a massive help. Want to get more people, want to help more people. And if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment below. I'd love to know what your feedback is. And I'd love to know what everyone thinks of this podcast. All right. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Speak soon.